There's something unsettling about watching people who seem perfectly content with very few friends. Society tells us that loneliness is a disease, that isolation is a red flag, that something must be fundamentally broken in those who choose solitude over social connection. But what if the opposite is true? What if the ability to exist comfortably outside the gravitational pull of constant companionship isn't a deficit at all, but rather a sign of something most people will never develop? Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher who saw through humanity's comforting illusions, understood this paradox intimately. He spent much of his life alone, not because he was rejected, but because he recognized something disturbing about human relationships that most refuse to acknowledge. He observed that the masses cluster together not out of genuine affection, but out of a desperate need to escape themselves. They seek friends not to understand the world more deeply, but to avoid confronting the emptiness they feel when no one is watching. If you find yourself with few or no friends, you might initially believe something is wrong with you. You've been conditioned to think this way. But consider another possibility. Perhaps you possess psychological traits so rare, so psychologically demanding, that most people simply cannot match your frequency. Perhaps your solitude isn't a punishment, but a natural consequence of operating on a wavelength that the average person finds uncomfortable, even threatening. The question isn't whether you're capable of friendship. The question is whether you're willing to compromise the aspects of yourself that make friendship scarce in the first place. And before you answer, you need to understand what those aspects actually are. Because once you see them clearly, you'll realize that your isolation might be the most honest reflection of who you actually are. If this kind of deep psychological reflection resonates with you, subscribe to Inner Truth Lab. You've felt it for years, haven't you? That subtle but persistent sense that you don't quite fit into the social machinery that seems to operate so effortlessly for everyone else. You watch people form friendships with apparent ease, bonding over shared complaints, mutual entertainment, comfortable small talk. And you try. You genuinely try. But something inside you resists, not out of arrogance or social anxiety, but because the entire exchange feels fundamentally hollow. When people speak, you notice they rarely say what they actually mean. They perform friendship rather than practice it. They share opinions they've borrowed from others, express emotions they think they should feel, and maintain connections out of habit rather than genuine appreciation. You see this clearly, and it exhausts you. The energy required to participate in these social rituals, to pretend that surface-level interaction satisfies some deep human need, becomes unbearable over time. So you withdraw. Not dramatically, not with anger or resentment, but quietly. You stop reaching out. You decline invitations. You let relationships fade naturally, and you notice something disturbing. Most people don't actually notice. The friendships you thought mattered dissolve without resistance, as if they were held together by nothing more than proximity and convenience. This confirms what you suspected all along. Most human connections are transactional, conditional, and fundamentally superficial. But here's where the real discomfort lives. You can't help but wonder if the problem is you. Society has convinced you that friendship is a basic human need, that isolation indicates psychological dysfunction. You've internalized the narrative that social connection equals mental health, that loneliness is something to be cured rather than understood. So you exist in this strange tension, knowing that most friendships feel meaningless to you, but questioning whether your inability to value them reveals some fundamental flaw in your character. The truth is more complex than either answer allows. Your solitude isn't a disorder, but it's also not simply a preference. It's a consequence of possessing psychological characteristics that make conventional friendship genuinely difficult. Not impossible, but demanding in ways most people never have to consider. Schopenhauer built his entire philosophy on a foundation most people find unbearable. That human existence is characterized primarily by suffering, that our desires are essentially insatiable, and that the relief we seek in social connection is largely an illusion designed to distract us from this fundamental truth. He wasn't being pessimistic for its own sake. He was observing human behavior without the comforting filters that make life bearable for most people. In his work, Schopenhauer noted that people form friendships primarily to mirror themselves back at a more flattering angle. We seek companions who validate our worldview, who confirm our biases, who make us feel intelligent, attractive, or morally superior. Genuine friendship, the kind that challenges us or forces us to confront uncomfortable truths, is exceedingly rare because it requires both parties to value truth over comfort. Most people will sacrifice truth for comfort without hesitation. This is why Schopenhauer valued solitude. Not because he hated humanity, but because he understood that most social interaction operates on a level of dishonesty that genuine thinkers find intolerable. When you spend time with most people, you're not actually connecting with them. You're navigating a complex system of social scripts, unspoken rules, and mutual ego protection. The real person, if such a thing even exists beneath the performance, rarely makes an appearance. The philosopher also recognized that intellectual depth creates natural distance. The more you think, the more you notice patterns others miss. The more you question assumptions, the less you have in common with people who accept conventional wisdom without examination. This isn't superiority, it's simply incompatibility. A person operating at a certain level of psychological awareness literally cannot participate in conversations that require them to pretend that superficial concerns matter deeply. Schopenhauer saw friendship as something that should emerge naturally from genuine compatibility, not from social obligation or fear of loneliness. He believed that forced companionship was worse than solitude because it required constant self-betrayal. When you compromise your authentic nature to maintain relationships that don't actually nourish you, you're not avoiding loneliness. You're just experiencing it in the presence of other people. The first trait that distinguishes those with few friends is intellectual independence. You don't adopt beliefs because they're popular or socially convenient. You examine ideas on their merits, follow logical implications even when they lead somewhere uncomfortable, and refuse to pretend agreement simply to maintain social harmony. This makes you exhausting to be around for people whose identity depends on having their assumptions confirmed rather than challenged. Most friendships are sustained by a kind of intellectual agreement. We'll both pretend that our shared opinions represent objective truth, and we'll support each other against anyone who questions them. You can't participate in this game. When someone presents a flawed argument, you notice. When group consensus contradicts observable reality, you can't unsee it. This doesn't make you argumentative. You might stay silent most of the time, but your silence carries weight. People sense that you're not truly with them, even when you're physically present. The second trait is emotional self-sufficiency. You don't need other people to regulate your emotional state or validate your experiences. You've developed the capacity to sit with discomfort, to process complex emotions independently, to find meaning without external confirmation. For most people, friendship serves as emotional infrastructure. Someone to call when they're upset, someone to celebrate their victories, someone to witness their life and confirm it matters. You've built this infrastructure internally. This self-sufficiency threatens people in ways you might not fully recognize. When you don't need them for emotional support, they can't figure out what role to play in your life. They offer advice you didn't ask for. They try to solve problems you're not struggling with. They create drama to feel useful. And when you remain calm, when you don't play the role of someone who needs rescuing or supporting, they often retreat. They interpret your independence as coldness, your self-containment as rejection. The third trait is brutal self-honesty. You see your own flaws with uncomfortable clarity. You notice your patterns, your contradictions, your self-serving rationalizations. This level of self-awareness makes it almost impossible to maintain friendships built on mutual ego protection. When someone complains about a recurring problem they're clearly creating themselves, you see it. When they ask for advice but really want validation, you know it. And because you hold yourself to the same standard of honesty, you can't pretend not to notice. The fourth trait is selective authenticity. You refuse to perform a version of yourself designed to make others comfortable. You won't adopt fake enthusiasm for things you find meaningless. You won't pretend to care about social hierarchies, status games, or conventional markers of success. You exist as you are, and you're willing to pay the social cost of that authenticity. Most people find this threatening because it exposes their own performative nature. Your refusal to wear a mask makes them conscious of the masks they're wearing. This authenticity extends to your values. You've examined what actually matters to you, often discovering that your priorities don't align with social norms. You might value depth over breadth, meaning over comfort, truth over belonging. These aren't choices you made to be different. They're conclusions you reached through genuine self-examination. But they make casual friendship nearly impossible because most social interaction requires participants to pretend that conventional values are universally important. The fifth trait is comfort with psychological darkness. You don't flinch from uncomfortable truths about human nature. You understand that people are often motivated by envy, fear, and ego rather than the noble intentions they claim. You see manipulation, you recognize passive aggression, you notice when someone's kindness is transactional. This awareness doesn't make you cynical necessarily, but it does make you selective. You can't pretend someone's intentions are pure when you clearly see otherwise. Most friendships require a degree of willful blindness. We overlook manipulation when it's subtle, forgive betrayal when it's wrapped in justification, accept exploitation when it's framed as mutual support. You can't do this. Your psychological clarity won't allow it. You see when someone is using you for emotional labor, when they're maintaining the friendship out of boredom rather than genuine connection, when they view you as an audience for their performance rather than a person with your own inner world. The sixth trait, perhaps the most isolating of all, is existential awareness. You understand at a bone-deep level that existence is temporary, that most human concerns are ultimately meaningless, that the stories we tell ourselves about purpose and progress are comforting fictions. This awareness changes how you interact with people. You can't get excited about promotions, gossip, or social drama when you're conscious of the larger context in which these things occur. You exist with one foot outside the human game, and that position makes genuine participation nearly impossible. Understanding these traits doesn't immediately make your isolation comfortable, but it does transform how you interpret it. You stop seeing your lack of friendships as evidence of deficiency and start recognizing it as a natural consequence of psychological development. The discomfort shifts from "what's wrong with me" to "how do I exist authentically in a world that punishes authenticity?" This shift is subtle but profound. You begin to notice that the loneliness you feel isn't actually about lacking friends. It's about lacking people who can meet you at your actual level of depth. You're not lonely for companionship. You're lonely for genuine understanding. And once you make this distinction, you stop trying to fill the void with superficial connections that only intensify the emptiness. Your internal posture changes. You stop apologizing for your solitude. Stop explaining it. Stop trying to convince yourself or others that you're working on being more social. You accept that your psychological makeup naturally results in fewer but potentially deeper connections. You understand that quality and quantity are inversely related in human relationships. The more authentic you are, the fewer people will be able to sustain connection with you. This isn't pessimism, it's mathematics. You also develop a different relationship with loneliness itself. Instead of experiencing it as something to be solved, you recognize it as information. Loneliness tells you when you're compromising yourself to maintain relationships that don't actually nourish you. It signals misalignment between your authentic self and your social performance. When you feel lonely in a crowd, that's not proof you need more friends. That's proof you need fewer inauthentic connections. This awareness creates a kind of internal freedom. You stop seeking validation through social belonging. You stop measuring your worth by the number of people who claim to care about you. You develop the capacity to exist comfortably in your own company, to find meaning in solitude, to build a rich internal life that doesn't require constant external input. This is the kind of reflection we explore deeply here at Inner Truth Lab. The ultimate truth Schopenhauer understood, and what you're beginning to recognize, is that friendship as most people practice it is a form of mutual distraction. Two people agree to help each other avoid confronting the fundamental questions of existence. They fill each other's time, validate each other's choices, and create the comforting illusion that life makes sense if you just have the right people around you. But you can't participate in that illusion, not because you're better than it, but because something in your psychological makeup won't allow you to sustain that level of self-deception. You see through it, and once you see through it, you can't unsee it. This leaves you in a strange position, too aware to accept conventional friendship, but still human enough to sometimes crave connection. The resolution isn't to become more social or to lower your standards. The resolution is to accept that you're playing a different game entirely. While most people are building extensive networks of shallow connections, you're waiting for the rare individuals capable of genuine depth. While they're maintaining friendships through regular contact and shared activities, you're holding space for the possibility of authentic understanding. This doesn't mean you'll never have friends. It means your friendships, when they emerge, will be based on something more substantial than proximity, shared hobbies, or convenient timing. They'll be based on genuine compatibility, mutual respect for truth, and the rare ability to be fully yourself in another person's presence. These friendships are exceedingly rare, but they're also the only kind worth having. Your isolation isn't a problem to be solved. It's a reflection of your unwillingness to compromise the traits that make you psychologically distinct. Every person with few friends faces a choice. Change who you are to fit into conventional social structures, or accept that your authenticity naturally limits your social circle. Neither choice is wrong, but only one allows you to maintain integrity with yourself. Schopenhauer chose solitude not because he failed at friendship, but because he succeeded at something more difficult, being honest about what friendship actually requires and whether he was willing to pay that price. You're making the same choice, whether you realize it or not, and the discomfort you feel isn't evidence you chose wrong. It's evidence you chose authentically. If this exploration resonated with something in you, if you recognized yourself in these psychological patterns, then you found what this channel exists to provide, a space for uncomfortable truths about human nature, delivered without judgment or false comfort. Inner Truth Lab isn't about teaching you how to make more friends or become more socially acceptable. It's about understanding yourself deeply enough to stop apologizing for who you actually are. Take a moment and consider leaving a like on this video, not as a casual gesture, but as an acknowledgement that this kind of content matters to you. The algorithm treats likes as a signal that depth and authenticity have value, and your engagement helps ensure these reflections reach others who are tired of surface-level psychology and motivational platitudes. More importantly, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me which of these traits resonates most strongly with you. Describe how you've experienced the tension between authenticity and social belonging. Your perspective adds to the collective understanding we're building here. This isn't a one-way broadcast. It's a space for people who think differently to recognize each other and feel less alone in their psychological clarity. Subscribe to Inner Truth Lab if you want to continue this kind of exploration. This channel is dedicated to examining the aspects of human psychology that most people avoid, the uncomfortable truths about social behavior, consciousness, and the games we play to avoid confronting our own nature. Every video is designed to leave you with greater self-understanding, even when that understanding is difficult to sit with. The world doesn't need more people pretending to be social when they're naturally introspective. It doesn't need more forced friendships built on mutual deception. What it needs are individuals courageous enough to exist authentically, even when that authenticity results in solitude. Your small circle isn't a failure. It's evidence that you're living honestly in a world that rewards performance over truth. This is Inner Truth Lab, where we examine what others prefer to ignore and where your psychological depth is understood rather than pathologized. Welcome to a space that values truth over comfort, depth over breadth, and authentic solitude over inauthentic connection.